Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Happy Tuesday, Heat Seekers. We got a great one tonight for you. Glad you're here with us, but we are more so excited for our special guest tonight. We've got the man, the myth, Sam Wallace from RotoViz. If you don't follow him on Twitter, his link is literally on your screen that you're staring at. You better do it. Whether it's a porch take or a master's degree picture, he's got lots of great content on there. His fantasy takes are amazing as well. Sam, how are you tonight, sir? Thank you for joining us. We are honored to have you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I'm very excited to be here. Been looking forward to jumping on this one for a while. I know Sully and I have been talking for a little bit, trying to get this put together, and he's been quietly persistent, which I appreciate, to get me on. And I've been, like I said, really looking forward to this and appreciate the introduction. Let's talk some football.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're here, and and we mean that. You do a great job on Twitter, putting out some great information as well as sprinkling in the personal life, because fantasy football is an awesome sport, but there are real people behind it. So getting to see your real life shine through is always a good thing. So we do appreciate that. Mr. Sullivan, how are you tonight, my friend? What's going on out there in the Great White North? I see you haven't melted.
Everything's on fire up here as well, Brad. So, no, things are great. Thanks for having me, as always. Sam, thanks for joining us. Looking forward to this. You are right. I've been lurking in your DMs for a while now, and 100% respected the fact that you were dedicating yourself to your master's, which, by the way, congratulations on. That's an incredible achievement. And so I circled back after seeing that you had completed that, and you were gracious enough to join us. I think one of the greatest things I like about following Sam is there's so much negativity and ugliness and just hate on Twitter. And Sam is truly one of the good guys who also delivers good fantasy takes. So that's what led me to follow you in the first place and ask you to come on. And I'm thrilled to have you here. And I know we're going to have a good time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's great. And, like Brad mentioned, a little bit of a balance of sharing some personal life on the timeline along with some of the fantasy content. And it's a balance. I mean,
totally.
I'm a person beyond just what I do in fantasy football. And at the end of the day, it's my page and I'll post what I want. And if anybody doesn't like it, that's fine.
Love it.
But it's true. You want to provide content to the people that follow you. And that's what I try to do, but try to keep it relaxed and fun and authentic is, I think, what I really try to do with it.
And I'm glad, Sullivan, that you didn't stop at all the hate and negativity, because it seemed like you were going in a weird direction with your compliment.
No, man. And hey, what are you new here? You know me. I take a little bit of a wide turn around to get where I'm going most.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
It's all that riding the moose you guys do up there.
Could be worse. You could be my wife. Try having a conversation with me half the time.
It could be worse. You could be the Saskatchewan Rough Riders who just signed Paxton Lynch. That could be worse, right?
Did they really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they did. As I was getting ready for the show and looking through the news and notes, I jumped over to Trade Rumors.
Paxton Lynch.
It's like Paxton Lynch making a comeback.
And if you want some coaching after the show, Brad, I can teach you how to say Saskatchewan.
I prefer not to. This is America. I'm gonna stay down here in America. You can have that word.
Yes, sir.
I know Rough Riders. All right. DMX taught me that one.
Good job. Proud of you. That was really good. That was a good pull. I liked it.
Yeah, right. All right. So speaking of news and notes, how about you give us some actual relevant news and notes, and let's chit chat. What's going on in the world?
All right. So I was doing a little combing of the news and the notes around the league. It's a little quiet this time of year, and I was trying to navigate through what I feel is coach speak, and more coach speak. So I sort of kind of honed in on some beat writers' thoughts, because I thought, well, they're there and they're seeing what's going on. So word coming out of Cincinnati is running back Joe Mixon is going to have his biggest workload of his career in the 2021 season. I looked it up, 313 touches back in 2019. He played in all 16 games. That was his biggest workload to date. So I'll start with you, Sam. Do you think that you're Sam. Do you think Joe will exceed those touches in 2021?
As far as the touch count goes, I'm not sure, but I don't think there's any reason why he couldn't push for having a career year this year, simply because there's nobody else in the backfield that worries me at all. Mixon is still young. He's very talented. If just for sake of conversation, if we're going to assume a full bill of health for him for this season, which is always a dangerous thing to do for running backs, but again, for sake of conversation, Samaje Perine is not going to be a threat to any meaningful work in the backfield. He'll be a change of pace back, but Mixon could probably push for the highest, market share of touches in his backfield of any system in the league. I mean, he might push, for that CMC or Barkley level of just volume for his own backfield. And It's going to be a good offense. That offense is going to put up a lot of yards. They're going to be in a lot of scoring situations. And if some good touchdown, regression, if you will, some good touchdown luck hits his way, there's no reason that he can't really finish. He should finish probably as a back end RB1 with upside for a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm excited about the situation. He's a guy that I've been actively trying to buy, and I bought in a few situations, but I've tried to temper my enthusiasm. I know that if you look at kind of the overall, just the rushing side of things in Cincy, I think they had like 400-ish rushing touches between like everybody. So I tried to temper it to, okay, what did Gio leave when he went to Tampa? Between what he had and Mixon had, it was like 230, 240, somewhere in that range. So like, okay, ballpark, worst case, I would expect somewhere from 230 to 250 is what I'm hoping for. And if he can get over and get into the CMC range, like Sam said, that would be amazing. I'm worried a little bit about the injuries, but I like that Cincy at least addressed the offensive line through the draft and through what they're doing. And, year two of Jonah Williams on the left tackle side of things, they've locked things down. I don't know about Riley Reef as an upgrade on the other side, but at least it's somebody who's a startable player as opposed to what they've had on the right side in previous years. So if I'm a person that's looking to go for it this year, I would definitely target Mixon because you can still get him at a reasonable price. If you're looking at true running back one type costs, he's probably the cheapest RB1 you could go after, I would think. That's
a good point to bring up because he's probably pretty polarizing in the community based on what I've seen across the timeline. So you may have somebody in your league who is just an anti-Mixon for whatever reason, and that's fine. So you may be able, like you said, to acquire an RB1 who I think maybe has RB5 overall upside. I don't think his ceiling is going to be much more than that. But yeah, there's no reason he shouldn't. I mean, you look at his last two seasons, 16 games in 2019, only 14 games in 2018, but he was RB13, RB10 in those 2 years. He's posted like 1,300 scrimmage yards and 8 touchdowns in each of those 2 seasons. I mean, so we know what he can do. If that volume stays the same and the efficiency stays relatively the same, again, back end RB1, high end RB2, you can probably get him for a lot less than that, depending on your league.
Totally agree with both of you. And I think one of the biggest things to me is the Gio departure. And if you've watched any Cincinnati games in the last couple of years, and I see Taylor is in our chat, big Bengals fan. Him and I were really super high on Mixon last year. I think we both had him up around RB5 overall. And they just didn't throw him the football. Like for whatever reason, they didn't throw him the football. And it was just frustrating beyond frustrating. My only concern for Mixon, and I agree with you, Sam, I don't know if he's going to get the touches, but I think he's going to get more quality touches. I expect the Bengals to be in the red zone more often. I expect him to be more involved in the passing game. But the only concern I have is there's only one football in that offense, and there's a ton of talent in it. They have 3 legitimate wide receivers. They have a great quarterback who could spread the ball around. So I'm not entirely sure how he's going to mix into it, but I agree. I think he's a back-end RB1 for sure. And most guys, don't really value him there right now. I think a lot of people have been sort of burnt by Joe Mixon, for a lack of a better term, in the past. And to your point, I think you can swoop in to that manager in your league and make them a reasonable offer to acquire yourself a sort of a hidden gem. I agree. All right, next up, I have Demaryius Thomas announcing his retirement. 10 seasons in the NFL. He finished as a Jet. He spent the majority of his time in Denver, so had a really brief, I think it was an injury-laden stop in Houston. 9,767 career yards and 63 touchdowns. So, Brad, is Demaryius Thomas a Hall of Fame talent?
I mean, I'm not on the Hall of Fame voting committee, so I can neither confirm nor deny your allegations of Hall of Fame status. The player, I don't think so. What has he got? 1 Super Bowl ring to his name. Yeah. When you look at his body of work, I mean, he was a great player when he was on the field, but there was injuries throughout his career. I mean, I don't know that there was enough to really give him the opportunity. He's definitely not a first ballot. He's probably one of those guys that if he makes it in, it's years and years down the road type thing. Like they're looking for somebody, maybe he's one of those guys that would get in with the, what do they call the senior guys that get in where you're nominating I can't even think of it now, but he's not a guy I don't see getting in anytime soon. Great player, had a great body of work. but I just don't know that there was a longevity and consistency to it that you want to see. I mean, like, look at Calvin. Calvin didn't play all that long, but he was dominant, and that's why he got in on the first ballot. I mean, that was a clear elite talent, and he made it. And Demarius was elite for a small time, but I wouldn't put him in on the first few ballots for sure. What about you, Sam? What do you think about him?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I just kind of did a quick look at his box score from his career, and like you said, had a really, really great stretch, like 6 straight seasons of wide receiver 16 or better. I mean, so for 6 years, you could lock him into pretty much being a wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2. Had those really good seasons where he was wide receiver 6, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Those 3 years in a row, just putting up a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns. Great stretch, but he would be like in the really, really good fame, Hall of Fame, just not the Hall of Fame. And that's fine. I try to not get bogged down in Hall of Fame debates with players and people online, because it's so subjective. And sometimes, like you said, it's very clear someone was dominant for their era. Demaryius Thomas was a really, really, really good football player, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. He doesn't have to be a Hall of Famer to have had a good career. He was great for fantasy, but again, the 1 ring, 5 Pro Bowls, there's just not enough there for me to say like, yep, he's locked in, put him in.
No argument for me. Like I said, bit of a slow news week, so I was digging deep. And to continue on the theme of slow news week, Golden Tate says he's looking at signing with the Titans, Colts, or the Rams. So first of all, what the hell are the Rams thinking? And second of all, is there any juice left at all in Golden Tate, Sam?
No. I mean, if he wants to go to the Rams and play with Stafford again, that's fine. But he would be at best their wide receiver 3, at best, for the Los Angeles Rams. But he's off my radar for now simply because he doesn't have a team. He's 32 years old, hasn't really had a good season in a couple of years. He had that stop in Philly. He was in the Giants for the last couple of seasons. I mean, his last quality finish, he was the wide receiver 12 back in 2017. He barely put up 1,000 yards that season. A lot of it was on receptions, only scored 5 touchdowns. He was, the wide receiver 12 in PPR, was the wide receiver 20 in standard scoring. So
wow.
Depending on how your league scored, he probably was either good for you or not, but that's fine. He was a great PPR guy for a while. But at this point in time, even if he lands on a team, I'm probably out on him. He might be worth like a waiver wire ad once the season gets started, if he lands in a situation where maybe there's a meaningful path to touches. But based on the teams that he listed off that he wants to go to, the Titans, he's not going to get a whole lot of work there. There's not a lot of volume anyways, especially now that Julio Jones is going to be there with A.J. Brown. The Colts, sure, maybe, that's fine. And then Rams, I don't see it happening. So he's off my board.
I'll just put it this way. Brandon Jacobs was talking about re-signing and playing defensive end. I mean, that's where we're at with the news right now.
That's true. That's true. I'm glad there's no Tim Tebow news in here. That was nice.
That was that. Brandon Jacobs was trying to sneak it in. I saw in the news blurb about it. He's like, yeah, if Tim Tebow can come back and change positions, so can I.
Why can't I? Right? Exactly.
Right. So I wouldn't touch Golden Tate. Leave him on the waiver wire if you want to throw some fab at him. If something starts to look like it might happen, maybe. But with the amount of talent infusion the NFL's had in the last few years, I mean, Golden Tate just doesn't make sense for anybody unless he's coming in to mentor people on route running or butt flipping into the end zone in Minnesota. I mean, like, those are really the only 2 things Golden Tate is excellent at: route running and flipping in Minnesota.
Yep, I would agree.
Yeah, other than being a member of the Detroit Lions again and being their best wide receiver, I don't see much of a path for him either.
Yep.
Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I'm sorry, what? Bless you.
I'm just saying, I just keep, and obviously because he's the only exciting receiver on my team right now, I went back and have continued to look at his film. I think if they put him in the slot to start, I think he has an excellent chance of being valuable from year 1. And I really like that kid. He definitely shows me some Golden Tate 2016, 2017 flickers in the ability to route run, in the physicality from being a guy who's only like 6'1". I mean, not to take the shine away from Golden Tate and talk about a receiver I do care about right now. Amon-Ra just is intriguing to me as somebody who needs wide receiver help on his team. The kid definitely has got something there.
I agree. I like him a lot. I just don't want to admit it to you.
But
we'll do it off the air.
Yeah.
Right. But the question we probably should be asking, I did read something, I think it was maybe Pro Football Talk was talking about Aaron Rodgers. Seeing as we have a Wisconsin fan and Wisconsin person in this chat, we should have this conversation. So by
we
July.
have to?
What,
See, I was trying to be nice. Hey,
no,
Let's do it.
we're bringing it up because I get questions from people, and I'm kind of firmly in the camp of I don't care, just make a decision. But I saw that PFT had reported maybe last week at some point that I guess there's some sort of clause where he can opt out and still get paid by July 2nd. He can opt out and get paid most of his contract. What are you hearing up there, and what's kind of the sensing about what is going on?
The same thing everybody's hearing. I mean, I don't know if Rodgers, him, or anybody associated with him or his brand, his agent, or anybody has said anything. I mean, it's been dark on communication from his side since this whole ordeal started, and that's fine. I mean, that's how he is as a person. He's very closed off when he wants to be. He's got his very own independent kind of stubborn personality, and that's fine. Obviously, a phenomenal hey, whatever. He can do what he wants to do. He's a phenomenally talented football player, Super Bowl champion, future Hall of Famer, all of those things. If you had to ask me right now what I think is going to happen moving forward, I do think he plays for Green Bay this season. I do. I don't know where else he can go right now that will give him as good of a chance to win another title in the next year or two. If he wants to go to Denver, I know that name was on the list for a little while. We'll see. I mean, they have a lot of great offensive weapons in Denver. I don't know where else he's going to go, or could go. And he cares about his legacy. He definitely does. And I saw somebody tweeting out, I think it was earlier today, like Eli Manning's got 2 rings. Ben Roethlisberger has 2 rings. Like Rodgers has got 1. And I think most people would say he's more talented than either of those players by far. He just doesn't have the hardware. He doesn't have the championships that matter. And, the Packers have gone 13-3 the last 2 years, been bounced in the NFC title game. If I had known, if we didn't have any of the Rodgers, drama heading into this season, I really liked how their draft turned out, honestly. I liked that they kind of traded back up to grab Amari Rodgers. He kind of represented a tier break in talent for me at the wide receiver position. The rest of their draft, I didn't mind knowing that they got Amari Rodgers when they did. Wasn't, how we as Packer fans and fantasy fans wanted to say, you keep missing on all these wide receivers. Why don't you draft any? Clearly, they're winning 13 games a year and getting somewhere. And it's not that they're not putting up enough points. So I don't know. I'm still kind of torn. I try to separate my fandom from it a little bit and try to be objective. Would I love to see him stay in Green Bay? Obviously. And I do think he's here. I do think he's here for this season. I don't think he steps on the field a moment before he absolutely needs to and feels like he has to. But I don't see the team trading him, and I don't see him not playing this year.
That's sad.
It is.
As a Lions fan, I would love to see anybody else in Green Bay other than the last 2 guys that have been kicking us for the last, 20 years. It feels like
about 100 years or so. It's only been.
Well, I mean, you guys had Magic Don Mikowski before that. I mean, he was pretty, okay.
He was QB1 one year.
I know. All right, so I think that is that.
That's it for me, brother.
Yeah, so that's all our news and notes. All right,
thank you.
So we're now 20 minutes into the show, and let's get to the main topic, which is, and if you have questions, get them in the chat. We're going to talk about some kind of tips and tricks for fantasy football. So we typically do this as an IDP show, and we hit it from 2 perspectives. So we're going to do it from an offensive side. Talk a little redraft, talk a little dynasty, and I know that in our show prep, Sully's got some good talking points in here that I want to hit on, but I also want to leave it as an open forum to talk about just kind of tips and tricks for doing a draft, doing a startup draft dynasty, doing a redraft draft, just kind of things that you're thinking about and things that you maybe even try to do now. Just to give people those conversations, those talking points. Because right now you're starting to see some people are still back to maybe getting bored and doing startup drafts and starting up leagues, or getting ready for redrafts, getting ready for Fishbowl for those of us that are in the Fishbowl. I mean, there's lots of drafts about to be happening soon.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start there. And if you want to add your own kind of spin to it, that's fine as well. This is more of an open forum conversation. And have a little fun with it. But Sully, I'll let you kind of lead in that conversation because I know you had some really interesting points that you wanted to touch on.
So first and foremost, all those awesome points in our show sheet, those are Sam's, not mine. But that's cool.
Well, even better.
But I'll just throw this one out there, and it seems really simplistic, but I believe that it's overlooked in a lot of drafts, and it's knowing your league rules, knowing your league's bylaws, and knowing your league's scoring system is imperative. And I can tell you, I've been in plenty of drafts where you're in about the 8th round, and in your group chat, you'll get is this PPR? And you feel kind of bad for that guy. So that'd be the one that I would start off with.
So true. I mean, know the rules and follow them better than anybody else. You set yourself up in a position where it seems super easy. It seems super obvious, like you said, but those things matter. Especially, for me, it comes down to how many starting positions are there for every player. Like I approach drafts differently if it's start 2 versus 3 wide receivers. If there's 1 flex, 2 flex, or 3 flexes, like those are the areas that I really look at. Is it tight end premium? That matters to a point. For the top end, I'm a little bit biased. I think people look at tight end premium and overvalue tight ends because of the scoring, and it really doesn't matter unless you're one of the top 3 guys anyways. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, know the format, know the scoring. Those things matter, and those can really help you capitalize on draft picks probably later in the startup draft than early. But yeah, that's a good point to bring up.
Absolutely. We do have, before we go to the next part, we do have a question from Jaws. I was thinking Amari Rodgers might get some backfield work with Jamal Williams out of town. Unsure if any rumors, just me speculating. So I know that they were pre-draft. Amari Rodgers was running drills from the running back group. Have you heard anything or seen anything that would make you think that Amari Rodgers might get any touches out of the backfield, or is that a Kylan Hill, A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones situation?
I have not heard or seen anything that would give me definitive confidence that that's going to be part of the regular rotation of plays for him. He profiles more as a slot wide receiver, great yards after the catch. Now, if they want to manufacture touches for him and get him in space, bubble screens out to the flat, things like that, that's probably more how they'll utilize him. But I don't project him to be like a Cordero Patterson, somebody who you can just like deploy out of the backfield as a running back, even though they're like a wide receiver profile.
There you go, Jaws. Hopefully that helps answer your question. Okay, so good question. If you guys have any others, make sure you let us know.
Please.
Mr. Sullivan, so now that we're getting back to that, what do you think? What's your thoughts on and I guess the question I have is, have you guys seen it recently? Because I feel like in a lot of the leagues that I've been in, most of the owners come in with kind of a baseline knowledge. I haven't seen too many big blunders. Have you guys had any experience here recently? It feels like it feels like fantasy owners are stepping their game up. I haven't had too many that come in and just make some really terrible blunders because they don't have a clue about the league. Have you seen anything, Sully?
No, it's been years, to be honest. And I think, credit to people like us that there's so much information out there for folks that they can find just about anything they need to find almost anywhere. So that, the 5-6 years ago of waiting on QB in a 1 QB league wasn't the most industry-wide thing. I think it's pretty standard now. So situations like that, like it gets harder and harder every year to come up with some sleepers for an article because people are that much more knowledgeable. I think there was the Scott Fishbowl blunder last year where Matt Barkley went first overall instead of Saquon Barkley. And Scott had a ton of fun with that. I think Matt Barkley even got involved in it. So
I think he did. Yep.
Yeah. So mistakes happen, that type of thing. And the only other thing you see is I know some guys that I play with in sort of home leagues that love a certain player, and they want to make sure they have that player on their team and they draft them. And good on you. Like, you pay your fees, you want to cheer for your team. If your favorite guy is Aaron Rodgers and you want to make sure you get him and you take him in the first round, good for you. Who am I to tell you what to do? So, but as far as blunders and stuff go, no, I can't recall anything in the last few years for sure. How about you, Sam?
Yeah, I would be in the same boat. And I have to keep reminding myself too, the vast majority of the fantasy football community as a whole, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, are more casual fans. I would dub them as more casuals, and that's fine. And I have to remind myself that a lot of the people that I talk to industry-wide are more serious about it, but not everyone plays that way or uses, the same level of resources, and that's fine. And I'll get DM questions frequently of trade questions, and I'm like, man, this seems pretty easy for me because I have my own way of approaching things, and that's fine. But wanting to make sure that however I'm presenting information is is actionable and educational for the community. And it may seem simplistic to me or to somebody else, might, like you said, seem like a no-brainer. But if you don't understand the value of PPR versus half PPR or tight end premium, I mean, those things, I don't see a whole lot of blunders anymore, like you said, but even just the little things I think can help managers get that little bit of an edge, or at least get them on the level playing field as the rest of their league.
Yeah. And, and I know I kind of wrestle with this conversation. I want to talk a little bit about the whole trade calculator. So I get a lot of people asking questions about, should I trust a calculator? Shouldn't I trust a calculator? What should I do with it? And a lot of the trade offers I get, guys will send me screenshots of whatever calculator they found that they're using. And it's, and I don't want to bash on it, because I love when people try to take fantasy to the next level, and building these things out are cool tools. I would encourage people to not just trust the one thing they look at, but to really dig into a player or dig into a trade offer, to negotiate. I know our friends from Front Yard Fantasy and Scott Fish coined the phrase making trading fun, or fantasy makes trading fun. What are your guys' takes on the whole idea of a trade calculator? And do you encourage people to use them? Do you encourage people not to use them? Sam, what's your take on it?
I think probably similar to both of you. It's a good tool that you can and should implement sparingly, but it definitely shouldn't be the be-all end-all. If you find yourself relying too heavily on a calculator to make those decisions for you, I think unfortunately that might say a little bit more about you, and you probably should do a little bit more brushing up on some research and some articles. And there's a ton of free content out there from a lot of really great people and platforms, and that's awesome. But I've been in a similar situation where someone will send me a trade offer and say, hey, here's this. Then they'll follow it up with a calculator that says it's even, it's skewed one way or another. And I think that's a good point of conversation then. It's a good learning opportunity for me and for that other person to really talk through, yep, it's a tool. It provides good insight. It's maybe one variable that you can measure, but it shouldn't weight too overly much on your decision to accept or not a trade.
Ms. Sullivan.
I think the biggest thing that a trade calculator lacks is the pulse of the league in which the trade is being offered. So
the context.
If Sam and I have a trade on the table and it's Calvin Ridley for Aaron Jones, the trade calculator doesn't know what my roster looks like. It doesn't know what Sam's roster look like. It doesn't know what the record of our teams are, or our history. And it doesn't know what the personal feelings of those league managers is. So I am, and I always have, and it might be a fault, but I've always valued the wide receiver more than the running back. So I will, and I use that Calvin Ridley for Aaron Jones example because I made that trade 2 years ago, trading Aaron Jones for Calvin Ridley. Didn't look so good for 2 years. I think it might look good coming into this year. We'll see. But that's just it with the trade calculator. It just doesn't have that. It doesn't have that feel. It doesn't have that context behind it. The best trade calculator that I have seen, though, is the DLF Trade Analyzer, because not only does it give you values for players, but it gives you recent trades that have happened in real leagues. So it gives you a little bit of context to it. So if I'm entertaining a trade with one of my fellow league managers, I will use that as sort of my circling the horses to figure out if I have a decent offer on the table. And then I'll go to them and I'll say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? I don't screenshot the calculator. That is, to me, the biggest red flag when somebody screenshots me a calculator in a trade, that somebody's trying to pull the wool over my eyes, and I don't want that to happen. So it almost is a instant rejection for that trade when I get that. But trade calculators absolutely have a place in the industry. They're complex tools to create. There's a lot of people that have done well with them. And I think they're an educational tool like anything else. But just like us not drafting solely on someone's rankings or solely on ADP, you shouldn't be trading solely off of trade calculators, in my opinion.
There you go. Perfect. And that actually answers the question. I think it's a good thing to have this conversation. I feel like I get at least one of those types of questions every few weeks from somebody. They'll shoot me a DM and say, hey, I got this trade offer. The guy sent a picture of a trade calculator. What validity do you put behind it? And it's such a fluid thing because they're, just like anybody who trades based on current ADP or current rankings. Yeah. I mean, it's all part of the puzzle, and you can't just take one piece of the puzzle. You have to kind of form the whole picture.
Yeah. And you got to form your own and make your own decisions too, right? Like to Sam's point, there's a ton of great content out there. I think the best fantasy managers absorb that content and make their own decisions based on it. And if you disagree with me or Brad or Sam or anyone else out there, that's fine. You've done your work. You've gathered the data. We're not right 100% of the time. In fact, I'm wrong way more than I'm right. So, but I trust my process and I make my decisions. And that's what I feel that most managers lack is they dive too much into a calculator or a rankings or an ADP. Do a little bit of homework, make your own decisions, and trust your own process.
Yeah, and I think a lot of fantasy managers too, especially if you're newer to the industry or newer to Dynasty or fantasy or whatever, they find and latch onto stats that maybe provide confirmation bias about players that they like or don't like, or they'll find a trend that worked one time and then extrapolate that into infinity to say, well, because it worked for this player in this situation, maybe not realizing that that was an outlier. That was something that isn't predictable, that, the vast majority of the community was wrong about, and that's fine. Outliers are okay. It allows us to adjust our process maybe a little bit and say, okay, this is within the realm of outcomes. It's so true. That context is huge. Doing your own analysis, your own insight, and maybe look for reasons why your opinion should be wrong. I think that's a good process that I do a lot during my writing. I have my thoughts when I go in. I let the research kind of guide me, and then I get to a point and I'm like, I'm there, but is there a refutable argument that could maybe turn this on its head and actually provide the other side of it? Because like you guys both mentioned, at the end of the day, we're all making an educated guess. That's all anybody does in this profession. It doesn't matter if you work at ESPN or you're just a guy on your couch with your laptop. Yeah. We're all guessing based on the same information that's available.
Well, and it seems like oftentimes I almost feel like people are fueled with the I want to win the trade or I don't want to look bad. So it's almost people get a little gun shy because they don't want people to roast them for a bad decision. And I'm telling people on the regular, listen, you're going to make bad decisions. A trade's going to happen that in retrospect you're going to go, I wish I had that back. It happens to all of us.
And I would rather have someone make too many bad trades and learn from it than not make any and then not actually grow. I mean, you got to get reps in. You have to go through and it's okay to even just like start a league where you know that you may not be competitive. Maybe it's a cheap buy-in or a home league or whatever, and just experiment and just go like, look, what's going to happen if I draft this way? What's going to happen if I make this move? Not that you're going to treat it like an experimental league. That maybe isn't totally fair to your league mates if you're not, trying to be competitive, but at least put yourself in a situation where you're okay and comfortable making those errors. It doesn't have to be in a big buy-in league with a lot of money on the line where you're just kind of guessing your way through it, but start small and get those reps in, make mistakes. Like anything else that we do in life, it's not going to be perfect the first time, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that segues us into one of your other points is when you're starting a league, how do you determine if you want to go all in to try to win year one versus try to play the long game in building your roster? And what does that look like to you? So if you're building your roster, are you, when you go in and you say, listen, I'm not going to try to compete year one, am I just going to draft young rookie 1, 2, year 3 type talent? Or, what does that look like for you? And Sully, I'll start with you on it. How are you building your rosters, or do you always want to go in and win it from year one?
I have this problem, and it's called fantasy football. So I'm in a lot of leagues and I do a lot of drafts. So what I try to do more than anything is be diverse in all of my lineups and draft a little bit differently here and there, simply because if something bad happens to Saquon Barkley in 2020, it doesn't, destroy my entire rosters. But honestly, Brad, I just I'll start my draft with some guys that I like. I'll take a look at where I'm picking. So if I'm picking 8th, I'll be like, okay, here's a window of guys I like at 8. Here's a window of guys I like in round 2 and then round 3. And then I just let the draft happen. And if the best players available to me are 27, 28-year-old wide receivers in rounds 3, 4, and 5, I might expedite my desire to go in a little bit. I do feel, though, sometimes, and a lot of times actually, that the most overlooked year in Dynasty is this one. And I think that a lot of us go into it with the desire to build for the future and win, because that is the ultimate goal of a Dynasty league, is to build a roster that'll be competitive for years. But it's okay to win your first year. And I had a couple of drafts last year where I went all in, didn't quite get there. Made some trades after the draft to try to get there. Didn't get there. Now I'm looking at it this year and I'm kind of going, I'm probably rebuilding in a year or so. But hey, I think you mix it up, you have some fun, different drafts, different styles, but ultimately I let the draft sort of play out and I make my decision in the middle of the draft.
Yeah, I like that. It's you got to stay water for sure. You got to let the draft come to you. You have to, be ready to adjust because you don't know how your league mates are going to draft. You don't know how they're going to value certain positions, especially at like the quarterback or tight end position. You don't know how those maybe onesie positions, or if it's a super flex league, you can start two. You don't know how those are going to always go.
Yeah.
At the same time, for me, it's challenging because I see a lot of new startups where managers draft their team, but it's disjointed. It's either like imbalanced between players that are going to peak at different times. And not that you only want to go veteran heavy, not that you only want to go rookie heavy. I think you should have layers to your team. So you do want to have a blend of like, hey, I have a core of 5 or 6 guys that are all in year 2 and 3 that are established. I know they're going to produce. They're kind of the anchors for my team. Then my next layer is going to be, some older veterans who, the Ben Roethlisbergers, if you will, the Tom Brady's, the guys who I know are still going to put up points for the next couple of years. I'm not counting on them much past like 2 years. And then maybe your third layer is a lot of young guys, a lot of high ceiling, first, second year players, and that's okay. I think there's an appropriate way to build a team with layers like that. Because I think too, sometimes people think like, well, if I'm building for the future, I have to go all young. Or if I want to win, I have to go all veteran. I mean, we're seeing more and more young players, wide receivers especially, produce in year 1. And the narrative for the longest time was always, if you want to compete in year 1, rookie drafts, go running backs. They're going to return value right away. And if if you're not competing right away and you want to grab a wide receiver because the shelf life is longer, and those things are true, but we're seeing a lot of these players enter the NFL that are more pro ready to compete, more ready to produce for fantasy. So the biggest struggle I see is when teams try to get a little bit of mix and match of veterans and young guys, but they don't match up. So you have half your roster that's going off every week, and that's great, but you have the other half of your roster in your lineup that is struggling to put up points, and your team's never cohesively peaking at the same time, and that's tough because the worst thing that you want to do in a dynasty league is be stuck in the middle because you're not winning, you're not getting your buy-in money back, you're paying in every year, but then you're also not getting that top-end pick to reload with a good player.
Absolutely, very good point. And as you're building your roster, Anthony's got a great question. Do you guys prioritize drafting a handcuff for your starting running back? So, you're the Saquon owner. You've now seen Saquon get hurt multiple years in a row. Are you making sure you lock up the next man up? Or in the case of the Christian McCaffrey, now he's coming back from injury. Do you make sure you've got Chuba Hubbard back there or whoever that may be? Sam, I'll start with you. What do you do with a handcuff?
I don't prioritize it. If it happens, it happens. Because I think it's too easy to go out of the way and go, well, I want to lock up the backfield for this team. I want to draft, both San Francisco running backs. I want to draft both James Robinson and Travis Etienne. I think there's a time and place for exploiting the confusion of a backfield and getting value out of that, because sometimes backfields are a mess and people say like, look, I'm hands off because I don't know. Yeah. And I think that's a really good chance for owners to take advantage of that risk and take a shot on a guy where they say no one wants him because of the unknown. That's, I think, where you can find value. But yeah, for handcuffs, I don't go out of my way for it. If it happens, great. But if I have Zeke, I'm not prioritizing Tony Pollard. If I have Delvin Cook, I'm not prioritizing Alexander Madison. If it gets to a point where I feel that that's a good value for them anyways, I'll take them. But it's tough to separate who you have on your roster and who might be the next man up behind them.
Sully.
I prefer to draft running backs that I believe have value, to Sam's point. Not necessarily prioritizing a handcuff. If I'm looking to grab a handcuff, I'm looking to grab your handcuff. So I want to grab Tony Pollard, Darrell Henderson, AJ Dillon, guys that I think have a role anyway, James Conner, like guys who have a role in their offense, regardless if the starter goes down. And regardless if I have that starter on my roster. So I have a viable fantasy asset. Then if that starter does get injured, maybe I have a starting asset now, or I have a league manager in my league who just lost their starting running back that might now want to acquire Henderson, Pollard, insert name here. So that's kind of how I go about it. But hey, if they fall in my lap and it's a great value in the latter rounds or into the late teens, 100% I'll select them. Yes.
Yep, definitely.
There we go. All right, so that's the answer to your question, Anthony. Hopefully that helps, brother. And then Tyler's got a question about a specific running back. What are your feelings on Miles Sanders? Seems like most everyone is down on him based on the competition they brought in, but is it being overblown? The offense should be improved, so I'm hopeful. So, look at the backfield. You've got Carrion now. You've got, obviously, Miles Sanders. They have Boston Scott. They've got all these options. But then they've got Jalen Hurts, who can run just as much as well. So, Sam, what do you think about this backfield? How are you feeling about it? Is Sanders the guy?
I don't really think it matters what we think Sanders can be when the team has already kind of decided through their actions how they want their backfield to look. And I don't think Sanders is going to be that running back one, that top 12 guy that we thought he could be. And even heading into last year, Eagles running back coach was, hey, we never want him to come off the field. He dealt with injuries a little bit earlier in the season, but it just never came to fruition. And I think we've gotten to a point now, a few years into his career, where I've seen enough of Sanders where I don't want him probably at his current price. If people are in on him, that's fine. And I think it's a good point to bring up, kind of as I mentioned at the top of this question. I can think he's a super talented player who can be a 3-down back, who can, be deployed out of the backfield as a pass catcher. But if the team doesn't view him that way, it doesn't really matter. What I think his production can be moving forward, if the team's not going to use him that way, they're not going to. And they've kind of made it very clear that they're not interested in riding one guy. They're going to give meaningful touches to other people. And I haven't seen enough yet of Jalen Hurts as the guy to know exactly how that backfield is going to look with a mobile quarterback. And we can look at other examples. Lamar Jackson's kind of the most recent one, obviously. How do the running backs in Baltimore, how are they used? Not in the passing game. They're a very prolific rushing offense, but that's kind of why I'm down maybe on J.K. Dobbins relative to what I think he can be, is the pass catching is not going to be there. So for Sanders, he's probably a fine, middling running back too. That's okay. And if that's what he is, that's great. He'll have value there, but I don't really see him anymore probably as we used to heading into last season.
Yeah, and and for me, anytime somebody asks me about Miles Sanders, I've tried to, because I don't know Nick Sirianni as the Eagles coach. He's only ever been Colts offensive coordinator or any of the other positions he's had in his career. So I looked at, what did Nick Sirianni do with the offense in Indianapolis? And, Frank Reich probably had a hand in building the game plan, but look at what the numbers tell us. Jonathan Taylor, 232 touches, Naheem Hines, 89, Jordan Wilkins, 84. I mean, this is not a heavy one running back. They're sprinkling in other guys. Now, even if Sanders is the guy and maybe he gets somewhere in the 2 to 250 range, that solidifies your RB2 conversation that Sam has already said, which is fine, but his cost is not RB2. Anytime I've talked to somebody about a Miles Sanders trade, people want more than RB2 value for him. So
they're stuck on what he was or what we wanted him to be. And that's challenging when you have to separate yourself from the name value and your preconceived notions of what a player is.
And it's tough, so I've steered clear. I don't have a Miles Sanders share and probably won't until his value fits more in line with what I would be willing to pay. But Mr. Sullivan, what say you about him?
I think you both have said it very well. And Brad, to your point about Indianapolis, insert Marlon Mack if he doesn't tear his Achilles in week 1 last year, and then spread the running backs, right? So what does that look like? So I look at Philadelphia, and to Sam's point, so you have Miles Sanders, and he appears to be your most talented running back. And then you bring Jordan Howard back. And then you draft Kenneth Gainwell. And then you pick up Kerryon Johnson off of waivers, and you still have Boston Scott, right? That's a lot of running backs in that room. And yes, I do believe Miles Sanders will be your feature back, but I don't know how many pieces of that pie it's cut up into. And I like him as a talent, right? Like I just wrote an article about him. I really like him, but I struggle with his value as well. And it's just simply because it's unknown. How are they going to use him? Running quarterbacks, mobile quarterbacks typically are good for the running back. But to Sam's point, they don't typically throw to them. They just invested for the second year in a row in a first-round wide receiver. So I don't know what that offense looks like, but the offensive line, if healthy, is one of the better ones. So I think he's an RB2 like you both do. I think he's slightly overvalued right now. if I'm looking to get Miles Sanders, it's probably around week 4 or 5 when all the people with the high expectations of Miles Sanders have cooled a little bit. And then I'll come in a little bit later and see what I can get him for.
I like it. And that's the thing that people don't think about is once you get in season, players are much more attainable because you can get them on either, as they're trending down, maybe they had a bad week or two, and you can talk the owner into selling. People start to get a little nervous in season. Well, they'll make moves like trading a first for Andy Dalton or something like that,
I did that last year, Sam, just so you know.
Well done.
It's a badge of honor, actually, at this point.
Hey, it's all right.
So somebody had to do it.
It'd be all right if I won the league, but I didn't. So.
Oh, and people get nervous when they think they can contend and their team really isn't there, and they'll do things like that. And vice versa. You might be able to get Sanders at a discount when you start to see what this looks like. Because right now, Philly has 8 running backs on their roster. I mean, 8. And all of them but 2, I should say, are guys that have seen game time or should see game time. And I just don't know what to make of it. So it's like, okay, I could make a case that Kenneth Gainwell is your RB2 or Jordan Howard or Carry-On. I mean, there's so many options, so I would
follow the actions of the team.
Totally.
That tells me more than enough.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, and Off the Schneid says I've been drafting Kenneth Gainwell as the Nyheim Hines of this offense at a cheap price tag.
Yeah, not a bad move if you want to get a piece of that backfield. That's probably the place to do it at what it's going to cost you. Yep, which is next to nothing.
Oh, absolutely. And while we're still talking running backs, when you're building your roster or managing your roster, how firm are you with having to have multiple running backs, or are you in the mindset that I can just roll with one really strong running back? I've been playing fantasy football since I think it was 1999, and there was a stretch there where Brian Westbrook was my running back, and I was in the championship for like 3 or 4 years straight just because Brian Westbrook was dominant. Speaking of Eagles, Sam, how do you feel about having multiple running backs, or do you just target having one really strong one and hope for the best with kind of whatever you can find?
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's definitely the single elite running back build, and it goes by a couple of different names. I mean, I write for RotoViz, so I kind of come along with people ask, "Are you a zero running back guy? Are you a zero RB truther?" And I mean, I get the appeal of both sides. Robust running back versus zero, whatever. For me, it's somewhere in the middle. It's that single elite guy. So if I can get a top end talent, a Barkley, a CMC, a Cook, Kamara, Henry, Chubb, whatever, somebody who I know is going to be locked into my lineup, they're matchup proof, they're in, whatever. Then I just hammer wide receivers for the rest of the draft, get a tight end, quarterback, whatever. That's fine because I think there's enough value at running backs in the 8th, 9th, 10th round of the guys like Nyheim Hines last year. I mean, guys like Boston Scott, guys like Gus Edwards, guys that are going to have enough of a role to be decent enough. And if they put up, 7, 8, 9, 10 points a game in PPR, my running back 2 spot, that's probably fine. Now, are there going to be teams that have 2 better running backs that are both putting up maybe 15, 20 points? Sure, but the cost benefit there for me then is, or the trade-off is, I'm probably rolling out 4, 5, 6 wide receivers deep, maybe another tight end that's, I paid up for an elite tight end. That's fine. So for me, if I ever have to walk away from a draft with a question mark, if you will, at any spot in my lineup, it's the running back 2 slot. And that's fine. I mean, I'm even just looking at some dynasty rankings right now and some startup ADP. Even somebody like Ronald Jones is going way, way too late for what I think he can be. And that's fine if you're out on him because you still believe Leonard Fournette's the guy there, whatever. I mean, Rojo's young. He's improved. He's put up, over 1,000 scrimmage yards now. That offense is going to be great. I mean, Brady's probably going to throw for 5,040 touchdowns. And so that offense is going to move the ball. But for somebody like that, I was just talking to another guy a couple of days ago. He sent me his roster. He was kind of concerned about his running back room. He had Jonathan Taylor and Ronald Jones as his 1 and 2. And I was like, that's fine for me. I'm okay with that because you have so much depth elsewhere. And we just know the running back shelf life is so short. Maximize it as much as you can. Draft the running backs you need in your rookie drafts, trade for wide receivers in their 2nd or 3rd year, and just go from there.
Mr. Sullivan.
I don't think I can say it much better than that. I'm, I guess, it's wherever you want to find the industry term. I guess I'm a modified zero RB kind of guy. I love wide receivers. It's my thing. So I like to have a running back that I feel can compete on a weekly basis. I don't even have to have a top 12 running back. And I think we fixate too much, and you go back to that trade calculator conversation. You send something off, and they're like, oh, "What is that guy? He's like an RB3. He's like maybe going to get 10 points a week." You know how many weeks last year I wish I would have had somebody in one of my lineups that got me 10 points. So I'm more heavy skewed to the wide receiver position. If I have two great running backs, that's awesome. I'm probably going to trading one of them to leverage that.
Yep.
But I don't set out to have that. If I end up with that, awesome. But I'm more skewed wide receiver guy.
Well, and the unfortunate thing with the going for one really strong running back is what happens if you keep running into the Saquon buzzsaw, or last year's CMC buzzsaw, where you're kind of running to look for, no pun intended, a running back to put in there, so you run into a situation where you just don't have anything. But you can also scour the waiver wire, because I'm sure Mike Davis was, people weren't drafting Mike Davis last year, things like that. So you, in a panic, can make the waiver wire work for you. But it leads me into my next question is, what do you do with Fab? So are you somebody who likes to conserve your money, or are you spending it and helping make sure you've got depth on your team in case of emergency, Sam? What do you do with the waiver wire throughout the season?
I tend to spend early and often. I really do. It's fine, because you can always play the game of, well, I'm going to wait to hold it. I'm going to wait to hold it in case something happens. But, and you mentioned it, right? What if you keep running into the Barkley injury or the CMC injury? We don't predict injuries in fantasy football. We can't. So I try to always just push that totally out of my analysis, because I'm going to stick to the strategy, or, a set parameter of strategies, and be fluid within that I think is going to work, that I've had success with in the past. And if injuries happen, they happen. A torn ACL is something you never hope or plan for any player. And if, there's that non-contact injury in practice, or, week 3 of the preseason, it happens, and we just have to adjust. But even without that, for me with Fab, I always end up finding, if I don't spend it early, I'm stuck with too much at the end. And I know it's a tradable asset in a lot of leagues, but I've really never been in a league where a lot of Fab has moved around. And maybe that's just been leagues that I've been in, where a lot of owners don't either value Fab enough to add it to trades, or where it's like a coveted enough asset where people are looking for it back in trades. So for me, my Fab's usually pretty much gone by like week 3 or 4.
And when it comes to Fab, for me, I'm always asking for money in a trade. Like, it's almost always asking for some money in the trade, because
fantasy panhandler.
Well, because most people don't think of it.
If people are willing to throw it on, absolutely. And that's probably not a bad strategy at all. If you're just like, I'll do this deal if you throw me like, $20 in Fab, that's fine. And that's fine. Whatever. If it's a throw-in piece, there's nothing wrong with that at all, because it's tradable currency in fantasy football. It's worth something to somebody.
It is to me, because it feels like as soon as you get to the playoffs, there's always a need to put some money into some position that is hurting. So
maybe I play in so many leagues with such deep rosters that the waiver wire is so barren 99% of the time. If something pops on the waiver wire, I'll spend all my Fab to get it. Yep. It doesn't really bother me, because 14 of the 16 or 17 weeks that my league is running that year, I'm probably not even going to have a claim that I'm not interested in. So, on to the flip side, Brad, if you make me a trade offer, and feel free to make me a trade offer for my Fab, I'll probably chuck it in there, brother.
There we go. I like it.
I would love to make trades with you, but your co-commissioners are not worthy of trading with.
One league with a co-owner, and it's hard to trade in that league.
And that would be the other thing. I cannot stand having co-owners in fantasy football, because it makes trading such a difficult conversation, because you have to be on the same page with the co-owner. Like, anytime I've had a co-owner, I've immediately booted him and just said, listen, I'll take the team, or you can have the team. I just can't do it. Like, I want to make the decision or get it done. How do you guys feel about it?
A quick note on that. A buddy of mine in a league that I'm in actually came up with an idea, and I would have to check to see if he got it off the ground, but he did like a GM head coach setup.
Oh, I like that.
Where
I've heard that too.
Yeah, where the head coach is in charge of setting the lineups every week and like in-season trading, but the GM is in charge of like all the rookie drafts every year, any off-season trading, things like that. And you have like defined roles, which again makes trading in season way easier, because you're only working with one person, but there still has to be some semblance of strategy then.
Rick's just in the chat heckling
Rick's
us.
having fun today. Hey,
He is.
He's chirping me about Rick and I play in this one league, Sam. It's a 96 team league, so it's like 8 divisions of 12, and Rick and I are in the same league. And he's had like the worst running backs ever, like a dog's breakfast of running backs, and he's won the division 2 years in a row.
Hey.
So it kind of goes to the point of
Yep.
depth is depth, and fantasy points are fantasy points.
Doesn't matter where they come from.
I agree 100%. And to the co-owner point, Brad, it's just like this stream. I enjoy surrounding myself with great people. And that's what I've done on that team. So if I make some trades, I make some trades, but I'm pretty sure we're going to win that league this year. So we'll
The
see.
confidence. I love it.
The lighting, it looked like your nose is getting a little browner over there.
If anything, it's going to grow, not get brown.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
All right. So we're getting close to the end of the show, but I want to touch on at least one more point here because Sam brings up a good point about elite tight ends mattering. So Sam, talk to us about your strategy for your roster when it comes to having an elite tight end, because we've talked about it plenty of times on here. What's the fantasy points per week, Mr. Sullivan, for tight ends? To be a tight end one, what is it, 10 points a week or something like that?
No, it's about 9.75 over the last 10 years. PPR.
Yeah, for me, if I don't mind paying up for that elite tight end, especially at a onesie position, and if it's tight end premium, you get that extra half point or full point boost. It's even better. But the gap is just so dangerous when you're looking at the top end talent of tight ends. And a thing to keep in mind as well, if you miss on a Kelsey, a Kittle, or a Waller, or maybe a Pitts now, depending on how you feel about him, whether it's redraft or dynasty, maybe Hawkinson makes that step this year. There's kind of that mid-tier now of is Fant going to take that next step forward? If I miss on those guys, I am waiting and waiting and waiting until the very end, because people that will say, well, so-and-so finished as a tight end 1 this year, that doesn't mean anything, because the difference, I think last year, the year before, between like the tight end 8 and the tight end 16 was just a couple of points per game. Like that was it. So to say someone finished as a tight end 1 and they were like the tight end 9, I don't care. You might as well have had the tight end 20. They probably gave you the same amount of production, but you got him way later. So it does make a difference. And even just looking at the tight end finishes from last year, Kelsey, 314 points. Second was Waller with 282. Third was Hawkinson with 177. I mean, so that is just an astronomically far gap down.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Logan Thomas 176, Tunyon 176, but I mean, 314 to 177 between 1 and 3. So if you're going to get that top 2 or 3 guy, great. But otherwise, the difference between, tight end 8, 149, tight end 16, 140. So 9 points across tight end 8 to tight end 16. So if you don't get one of the top ones, just wait, because it's not worth it. I mean, if you really want to take your shot on a guy like maybe Hawkinson or somebody, and Rick brings up a good point. Hawkinson scored less than the wide receiver 37. So when you look at that comparatively to the other positions, I think that's why tight end premium gets skewed a little bit, because people automatically look at that and elevate their perception of value across the board, and it's just not the case.
Mr. Sullivan.
I shy away from tight end premium leagues, to be totally honest, because all it does is take those elite tight ends and make them even better.
Yep.
Right. Like I'm writing about George Kittle today. In 2018, in a 1.5 per tight end premium league, he was like wide receiver 6. Or sorry, 2019, he was wide receiver 6. If you played in a 2 point per premium tight end league, he was wide receiver 2.
Yep.
Now that to me overinflates the value of those assets. I do like Kelsey, I like Kittle, I like Waller, I like Kyle Pitts. But
who?
I'm not going to start that again. But I will say, if exactly the same as Sam, if I don't get any of those guys, I'm out. You just look at last year, Logan Thomas, Robert Tunyon. The year before, you can pull up 2 or 3 guys before that. Every single season, we seem to have a late round tight end. This year, I'll wait forever for Gerald Everett and be totally happy with that. I think
Jared Cook is another guy who I'm probably going to grab late.
Totally. Logan Thomas, again, even in a loaded Washington offense, could still produce this year. Yep. Tyler Higbee could bounce back. You're talking Kittle, Kelsey are round 2 startup valued players right now.
Yep.
I don't want to go there. I want to take my wide receiver 1 in that range. If it's a super flex league, they're going to slide back into the 3rd round. I'm looking at getting a running back or maybe my secondary quarterback there. I'll wait on tight end. I'll find one later. I'll draft one coming out of as a rookie. Like I have no problems with that, to be totally honest.
I would agree.
Yeah, I don't touch tight ends early. I made the mistake in Fishbowl last year because of the way scoring was. I went Kelsey Kittle as my first 2 picks, and very quickly was in a losing situation with Kittle off with injury. And
Yeah, but that wasn't a bad idea. That was just an unfortunate circumstance. I went
Right.
Dak Kyler in that same league and was thrilled for 4.5 weeks, and then I wasn't so happy. Right?
Yep.
It wasn't your process. It was an unfortunate result.
yeah, very true. And that's such a different league, so it really isn't something you can use as a standard for anything.
Yeah.
But I think you guys are absolutely right. You know, if you're in a dynasty startup or a redraft startup, I would wait very long before jumping on tight end unless the value just falls and you can get one of the elite guys. I'm not going after one of them because how often are you facing that guy that's got Kelsey? Once, maybe twice a year. And you have to hope you built a strong enough roster that you can deal with facing an elite tight end, you know?
Yeah, and if your tight end gets you 17 points and your opponent's tight end gets you 4, that looks good unless his wide receivers outscore you by 35 and his quarterback by 10, right? So who cares at the end of the day, really?
Very true. So, and Rick says, glad I got all my cheap Cole Kmet last year. I do.
That's another one.
Yep.
Who's the other one I'm blanking on right now?
Adam
New
Trautman.
Orleans. That's it. Thank you.
Trautman.
That's another one. Like there's so many out there. There's so much potential.
Yep. So, well, that's it, folks. We had a great night. We gave you some tips, some ideas, some things to think about. Hopefully, we sprinkled some knowledge on you. It's been awesome. Sam, I really do appreciate you jumping on with us tonight. It's been a blast and an honor to chat with you. The floor is yours, my friend. Tell everybody what you got going on, where they can find you, what you're up to, and where they can read your content.
Sure. Yeah. Again, thank you guys both so much for the opportunity. It's been great to sit down with you guys both and put names to faces and chat for an hour about football. Yeah, as you mentioned, I write for RotoViz. You can find all of my content over there. My Twitter handle is right on the screen at @SWallace_FF. The link to my bio at RotoViz and all my content is right there in my profile. I'm also doing some one-on-one fantasy consulting a little bit this summer as well. So if you want to sit down and chat with someone who can be an objective third-party sounding board about your upcoming draft or some trade ideas or questions, let me know. That's my pinned tweet right at the top of my profile. And yeah, DMs are always open. Always enjoy engaging with as many people as I can and try to be as responsive as I can.
There we go. So hit him up. Make sure you show some love because it'll be well worth your time to spend some time with him. He does a great job and has a lot of great stuff going on. Mr. Sullivan, it's always a pleasure. I will tell you folks, we are off next week. We're letting everybody here at Roto Heat take a holiday from the streaming. So our IDP show and our Tuesday night show will be off, but then after that, we'll be back hitting it hard and hitting it hot and heavy because training camp's open in just a few weeks. We're less than a month away from Cowboys and the Steelers reporting. And actually, at this point, everybody's reporting by this time next month. So we'll be hitting it hot and heavy. And once we get back into the season, we do nightly streams of everything from DFS to redraft to IDP and our normal dynasty show. So make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all the things that I tell you to do every time you see my face on YouTube. We love you guys. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Also, right there, playlist. Hit it. Watch the videos. Do it. You want to.